Up next, we will have a poem recitation. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is a poet laureate, emeritus of the city of Edmonton, an award winning disabled and queer artist. She is a Canadian Poetry Slam champion and holds a Master of Arts in Cultural Studies from Queen's University. Her second book of poetry, A Fate Worse Than Death, is out now with Arsenal Pulp Press. She is a recipient of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal and the Edmonton Artists Trust Fund. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Nisha Patel.
I might be one of the only friends I have that owns a printer still. So if you need to have a printer at home, that's my advice for you of getting ahead and networking. It's very valuable. Most hotels will also do it for you. Not that we all make hotel money. I'm going to give a little context about myself. I grew up in Edmonton. I'm very grateful for the sacrifices that my parents made coming to a Canada that was very cold. It was very lonely for them. It's a theme in a lot of my work and a lot of my poetry and how I connect to people. But I also think it doesn't excuse us for having an obligation to the people who were already here and to each other, for newcomers and for immigrants, for refugees. And I'm still trying to figure out how I can contribute to the world in a way that makes things more caring, more safe. And to be very honest, I actually lean into my anger quite a bit in a lot of my work as poet laureate as well. I found that some people have platforms where they do spread messages of joy, but that's not all of what I do. But it takes kind of all of us, right? It takes people from all across the board who have different styles. For me, the anger tells me when I'm right and when something is worth fighting for. And this is something that I've tried to hone in a way that is safe to process and safe to hold and safe to motivate and influence others. I also find that as a poet, I came from actually a business background. I did my undergrad in business economics at the U of A. I studied leadership, which is after 2 years of getting a leadership certificate, you actually can't just like teach people how to be like a good person. You can't just teach people how to be a leader. You can teach them the skills on how to care for people better. You can teach them how to talk to people. You can teach them how to make connections that matter. And that was a really, I would say, male dominated program. I actually think the business school is doing incredible work now. Things have really changed. There's actually more women enrolled in university than ever. But it was a scary time for me coming from a culture that ended up being very sexist in some ways, and then going into a program that also felt very sexist, but not all the time. After I left university, I ended up working in electoral politics and municipal governance for 3 years. I was an intern for 28 months, which is quite a title to hold. Takes up many lines on my resume, and I ended up quitting to pursue art. I had not been taught as a poet in university, and it was something that had become a passion for me. And I reached a point in my health where I was fearful that I would not make it to another year. And I gave myself kind of this ultimatum that, I'd saved enough money. I was going to try to do art for a year. And it was like a year to the day that after I had been out there, staying up all night trying to do these gigs, getting a cut of the door for like sometimes like $5 because no one came, or like, if I was lucky, like $100 or $50, whatever it was. Almost a year to the day at the end, I had finished the first draft of my first book of poetry, and I was offered a book deal. In Canadian publishing, these are not big numbers, by the way. They sound fancy, but it's Canadian book deals are like very small. 300 copies in a year, you're like a successful debut author. But it wasn't easy. That first year as an artist, doing gigs, applying for grants, I ended up making, I don't know if you can guess, but I ended up making $12,000. The rent is 1,000. Not at my mom's, which is where I lived, but I used that money instead because I had the benefits of my parents' sacrifice and their care to invest in more education, in poetry education, in writing. And I became, in many ways, an entrepreneur for my own artistic talents, my own artistic work. I took workshops for free. I paid for them as well. I sought out community. I went to events. You have to be in the community that you want to be a part of. And I ended up for many years then working as an independent artist, taking on commissions, which became a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, just like trying to focus in on the fact that like I loved art so much that I just hoped that other people would see that, and that would fuel the opportunities that would keep me in the industry. As COVID kind of rained down on us, I did a thing that I'd been taught in business school to do, pivot. And I decided to go back to graduate school. I did my first degree at Queen's. I did my second degree at UBC, and I'm currently finishing that off right now. They'll tell you if you end up doing your thesis that everyone changes their thesis, things go off the deep end. It is true. I've now changed my thesis 2 times. It will probably change one more. And I'm just hoping everything I have this faith that things will end up in a good place. And if they don't, I'm also very lucky to have an incredibly supportive partner who has helped me in times of need, both financially and emotionally, but also now to be in a position where I will hold space for him and work in a partnership as we move forward. And again, that's a privilege that not everyone has. I'm going to end by sharing a poem. Tracy is such an incredible organizer. Tracy and I met many years ago, and sometimes you meet people who believe in you from the get-go before you believe in yourself. And I was in a time of change. I wasn't certain that I could do this, do art, do public speaking, do disability advocacy and employment right advocacy for a living. And Tracy was like, no, of course, come. And so today I contacted Tracy and I offered her the only thing that I know how to do, which is a poem. So here it is for everyone. There was a fire at the old boys club, and they're saying I started it with the candle my mother lit on my first birthday, because someone's God told us to celebrate. And back then we knew it was hard, knew that the paychecks didn't look the way the bosses did, but we wished on that flame for the extra 28 cents on the dollar or the safe walk home from the bus stop in this country that did not belong to us. And even then, I knew not to blow that candle out, to keep it burning as long as possible until the white icing and the toy cars and the Barbie dolls melted too. And we kept our wishes locked inside our chests because we knew that hope was not a right, but a privilege. So I guess it's my fault. Me with my thick thighs and weak lungs, my god-awful opinions coming out of a face that begs not for acid or hunting knives, belts or bricks, bottles or fists, broken doors on hinges, just me and my body. Getting a foot in the door, my bare ankle a flicker of doubt in the men's eyes that maybe the future is not a mirror but an ocean's tide. And still, the old boys wanted nothing to do with me, told me to play outside just a little longer, weather the snowstorms and the lightning in July, do your time, jump higher. They promise the crown falls on a bowed head, shoulders bent enough to handle the weight, and the weight for success more important than the wanting. So take your orders, good women, stay in line. You're getting yours when everyone else is ready. There was a fire at the old boys club, and they didn't see it coming. Not even when the golf courses started to burn themselves. Not even when the caddies went on strike and the waitresses stopped smiling as they served the bourbon. There was a fire at the old boys club, and my alibi was tight. You see, I've spent the first 32 years of my life playing best friend to a series of men who prayed to their own effigies before naming their gods, and they were absolved of their mistakes and reborn time and time again as my idols were pushed off glass cliffs and suffocating in trophy cases. And some still believe that pulling each other up by their father's bootstraps while I fix my hair and do my makeup has nothing to do with it. There was a fire at the old boys club, started as a spark in the women's locker room, grew and grew until that spark could taste itself, a future inferno, something like an explosion. My name was a sparkler gone awry, my thick belly the fueling of a flame, and we asked to be seen and heard, as whole and as complicated as we are, however hard that is. Sometimes it's a good thing to go up in a blaze, a controlled burn, nature's remediation so that the forest grows again. And there isn't one solution because there was never just one problem. And I don't believe in bulls or bears or wolves, just little girls' assurances. And if I'm honest, I've never been a fan of guns or blanket diversity statements, words and trigger fingers that have always been too trigger happy to use self-defense against us. If all our enemies looked like bad people, would we paint a target on their backs or on their faces? There was a fire at the old boys club, a tiny part of this crisis. The earth demands our action, demands our love, and more than just our promises. So we take up the fight as patriots, only to a system that transforms justice, abolish the minimums, demand refuge for the refugees, give the land back to the matriarchs, and listen with open minds to how the system hides its own inequity. Look harder, pay attention. We're arguing for much more than 28 cents. And this time we're asking you to join us. There's no room left on that fence. You see, there was a fire at the old boys club, and I'm starting to think that we started it. Thank you.